The Flint, Michigan water disaster is truly a crisis at this point. If you haven't been following the story, the contamination of Flint, Michigan water started in April of 2014 when the city changed the source of its drinking water from Lake Huron to the Flint River. Okay. And this led to massive lead contamination, huge public health crisis. 6,000 to 12,000 residents with severely high levels of lead in their blood experiencing all sorts of health problems. In addition to this, there is every reason to believe that changing the water source from Lake Huron to the Flint River caused an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease, which has killed 10 people so far and affected about 77 people. There's been a class action filed by 4 families in November against Governor Rick Snyder and 13 other officials. January 5th, a state of emergency was declared by Governor Rick Snyder, and then President Obama eventually declaring it a federal state of emergency. When you look at the water, Lewis, this is just sickening.
Yeah, it just looks like, well, it kind of looks like urine or something. I don't know. It does not have a good color, and this whole thing just reeks of incompetence everywhere from the city administrators to the EPA.
4 officials have resigned so far over the mishandling of the situation. What is the latest on this? There's been so much in the news, particularly over the big snowstorm weekend, and it makes sense to really get up to speed on it. First of all, the idea of switching to the Flint River as a source of water was rejected in 2012 by an emergency manager who was appointed by Rick Snyder. The emergency manager for Flint, Michigan, appointed by Governor Rick Snyder in 2012, said, no, we're not going to use the river here as our drinking water source after consulting with the state's Environmental Protection Agency. Now, how could the river, where they said, no, we are not going to use this as our source of drinking water, how could that same river that was rejected in December of 2012 suddenly be suitable for consumption just 16 months later? And we don't have an answer to that, right? The question A is, why was it rejected as a source back in 2012? We haven't gotten a straight answer to that, Lewis. And then if it was rejected for some logical reason, then how are we all of a sudden saying it's okay to drink from it now?
Well, it was rejected after a consultation with state environmental regulators or whatever.
Right.
So it wouldn't be a financial reason. It would be that they deemed it unsafe.
Every indication is that that's the logical thing. There was some reason why the residents should not be drinking out of that. Now, who actually made the disastrous choice to start using the previously rejected river water to source the city's public water? Well, it was Howard Croft, the former director of public works for Flint, who resigned just a couple of months ago. He said that more than 4 months ago, in a videotaped interview with the ACLU of Michigan, that the decision to use this dangerously corrosive river as a source came directly from the Snyder administration. Croft said that the decision to use the river was, to use the term Lewis just used, a financial one with a review that went all the way up through the state. Every indication, Lewis, it was not used as the water source back in 2012 because the water was not safe, and that it ultimately was used for financial reasons, and it is just an absolute disaster.
And we talk about decisions just like this all the time. The decision to put people's health at risk to save some money. And, you'd have to ask the governor if the decision was, if he wants to save money because that savings is going to help the people of...
oh, yeah, I'm sure it was going to go to improving education.
Well, yeah, I mean, who knows what he was going to do with that extra money. But it's clear that he is probably the one that we can all point the finger at here.
We can also question, however, the EPA. They have shifted the blame elsewhere to Michigan state officials. The EPA saying under the Safe Drinking Water Act, the state of Michigan was responsible for implementing the regulations to protect their residents' drinking water. EPA's ability to oversee management of that situation was impacted by failures and resistance at the state and local levels to work with us in a forthright, transparent, and proactive manner consistent with the seriousness of the risk to public health. The problem, though, is that the EPA has admitted that its initial response was too slow. Once we finally saw Flint become a state of emergency at the state level, once we saw President Obama declare it a state of emergency at the federal level, only then did the EPA really activate, and a number of people had been petitioning the EPA to act months before this became national headlines, and they didn't. So is this a reason to get rid of the EPA, like some right-wingers and libertarians would say? No, this is a reason to further empower the EPA, but the EPA may share some of the blame, at least in acting too slowly here.
Yeah, that could be. This isn't something where you just flick a switch and the water is transferred, right? So I'm sure that some people in the EPA knew that this transition was happening.
Right.
I guess they didn't speak up loudly enough, if at all.
No, and of course the libertarians are saying, see, this is why we shouldn't have the EPA at all. Well, having the EPA there not doing anything is similar to what would happen if they don't do anything at all, and having them not do anything, or at least anything soon enough, was bad. So the idea that suggests we should get rid of the EPA is one of the dumbest ideas I've heard.